But this one is on nature-based solutions and our changing world. And we have three very distinguished experts as our main speakers, and we have a number of additional experts who will be coming in after the main speakers have given their presentations or discussions. The second thing to note is that this is not a presentation style webinar. They're not going to give long presentations. There's no slide presentations. We will do this in a conversational style. I will ask them questions and ask for fairly short answers from them, and then we can do back and forth and have more of a conversational approach to sharing knowledge and information on what's happening and what people are thinking. And then for those of you who are in the audience, thank you very much for joining. We had a very, very good response. In fact, more people than we can accommodate on the platform that we have at the moment. In future, we'll try and have a platform that can accommodate more people. We will invite you to send your questions in written format on the chat room. And then towards the end, we will take a few of them. We may not be able to take all of them. And I will invite the speakers to pick questions from the chat room and answer a couple of them. And depending on the time availability, we'll do as many as we can. And then we will close at the end of an hour. So it's an hour-long event. We hope to be able to finish in 60 minutes. Thank you all for joining. And it's now my pleasure to introduce the three speakers, and then I'll give the floor to them to give a little bit more of an introduction of themselves. So the first of our three are Mr. Raqib Amin, who is the country representative of IUCN in Bangladesh, been working in this field for many, many years. The second is Dr. Hasib Mohammad Irfanullah, who is an expert on capacity building for nature-based solutions to climate change adaptation, which is a project at ICCCAD. He works with us here. He's also associated with the University of Oxford, who are also part of this project. And then we have Dr. Ali M. Rizai, who is a visiting researcher at ICCCAD here, and also a graduate research fellow with the Virginia Sea Grant in the United States. So welcome all three of you. I'll give each of you the floor for a couple of minutes to make a longer introduction about your backgrounds and your interests. So Raqib, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Salim Bhai, and welcome everybody. And we are very happy to co-host this webinar. I'm Raqib Amin. I'm working as the country director of IUCN Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, we work, if we can define what IUCN does rather than what I do, we work at the species conservation, the habitat conservation, of course, and demonstrating those best practices and using evidence as a policy advocacy tool. And globally, if you talk about for Mbas, we are trying to do advancing nature as a solution. We have developed a global standard of Mbs, which will be launched very soon in World Conservation Congress, which is supposed to be launched in next month, but due to COVID, it is postponed to January next year. And we are also developing and promoting Envious. That's in a summary. Over to you.
Great, thank you very much. Hasib, would you like to go next? Just a fairly short self-introduction about your areas of interest.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hogg. Good afternoon, everybody. I have been working as an independent consultant in the area of environment, specifically biodiversity, climate change, and I have also got interest in research system, how research is being done and how it is being translated to influence policy and practice. As Dr. Hogg, when he introduced me, I'm also closely involved as one of the experts of an Envious project, nature-based solution project, jointly being implemented in Bangladesh by ICCCAD and the University of Oxford, where we are trying to develop the network of experts from Bangladesh. We are trying to establish a web portal where we will be able to get evidence, and we are trying to use those pieces of evidence to influence policy and planning by the government. And I'm sure that we will be talking about some of those issues in this particular webinar. It's great to be on this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hasib, and welcome. Just to add to what Hasib said, we will at the end of the hour make an announcement about this new network on nature-based solutions of Bangladesh, and my colleague Tasfia will give some more information about how people can join it after the webinar. So the third speaker, let me invite Rezai. Would you like to just share a little bit about your own background and interests?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Raq. I'm Rezai. I'm a bachelor. I have a bachelor's in water resources engineering and a master's in water resource development. I have just defended my PhD in civil engineering, where my majority of my work is on seeing how natural areas provide flood protection to the coastal areas. I have mostly worked on different models on the coastal areas to see how the impacts of coastal flooding, sea level rise in different coastal areas. And at this moment, I'm working on developing different nature-based solution projects and research ideas in Bangladesh, and also trying to collaborate globally from ICCCAD. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rezai. So it's nice to have a civil engineer who is working on nature-based solutions, and not just a biologist or environmentalist like the rest of us. So welcome. So I have a number of questions that I'm going to ask each of you, ask you to spend a few minutes, not too long, on each of them, and we'll have a bit of a back and forth, and then we will bring in our additional speakers, and then we can open the floor for responding to questions from the audience. So let me start by asking Raqib if you would address this question, which is now on everybody's mind in the context of the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic that we are seeing. The current thinking is that this is somehow a virus that has jumped from the animal kingdom into the human race. What do we know about this, and what are your thoughts about this, the particular problem that we are facing? Specifically COVID-19, but more generally, the kind of jumping of viruses from the animal kingdom to the human race. Raqib?
Okay. This pandemic has left us thinking about the nature, the power of the nature. This small microorganism, microscopic organism, has made the whole world to stop and ponder what went wrong. But this is nothing new. I mean, we had pandemic in the past, like Spanish flu in 1918. And before that, we have almost have a pandemic, SARS, Mbas, bird flu. This all has a zoonotic origin. Possibly 58%, as per the Guardian news that published, has a zoonotic origin. That means it originates from an animal, mostly wildlife. This one, I mean, scientists found a direct link of which animal, which pathway it has jumped from species to species and to human being. But the speculation is that the origin is a pangolin. Just to contextualize, pangolin is the most trafficked animal, wildlife in the planet. And it shows how this linkage between the wildlife trade and wildlife meat consumption has a threat to human, all the social, economic system. This is a wake-up call. And you know that China has closed their wildlife trade market. So does Vietnam is also trying. We are trying with the government of Vietnam. So the issue is how we can take this lesson and transform into policies and practices when in the post-COVID situation. And here is also, it gives a nice introduction of the nature-based solution. Keep the nature intact for our own good and also good of the rest of the world.
Thank you, thank you. So Hasib, let me move to you now and ask you the question of, in the light of the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic that we are seeing, how do you see the whole issue of nature-based solutions reacting and evolving going forward?
Thank you. Just to help the audience to just understand what nature-based solution actually mean, because often we hear a different term like ecosystem-based adaptation or plantation, biodiversity conservation.
Hasib, could you try to speak up a little bit? You're a bit soft.
Yeah. First, let me just shed some light on what do we mean by nature-based solution. As we can understand, when we are looking for a solution, definitely there are some challenges, some problems. Those could be climate change, disaster risk reduction, food insecurity, our poverty. But how can nature, more specifically, the services we get from nature, food, the climate regulation, flood control, the aesthetic value of nature. So if we bring all those things together and help to overcome our challenges, this is called nature-based solution. So nature-based solution is essentially action where we take the help from nature to solve our problem. As Mr. Amin just mentioned that there are some concern over wildlife, biodiversity. And exactly 1 year back, UN report was out, which actually showed us out of 8 million species of the world, 1 million are going to be extinct over the next few decades or so. So our nature is in a dire condition. But the problem is definitely we can't exactly just overcome using our nature to solve the problem of pandemic, which is going on at the moment. You need your social distancing, physical distancing, you need treatment, you need the hygiene, maintaining the hygiene. But we have to also think that how can we stop having this kind of pandemic in the future? Definitely, we have to invest in nature. We have to invest in conserving our nature and sustainably using its resources. But in the post-corona era, I see two vital challenges actually. As you can understand that much resource is needed. So funding is being channeled to different priorities to revive the economy, to support the people who are not doing well. So that this channeling or diversion of funding could actually might have impact on the funding we used to receive for biodiversity conservation and climate change action for that matter. And the second point I'd like to add, just a month back, Oxfam released a report and they actually alerted us 500 million people could be pushed into poverty if no action is being taken, which is a very, very serious concern. And poverty means low livelihood opportunity and more pressure on biodiversity and overexploitation of biodiversity. So this is the challenge we might be seeing, and we need to get prepared ourselves for that. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Hasib. So before I bring Rizai in, I'm going to go back to Raqib and ask you to explain a little bit, as Hasib has raised, what is new about nature-based solutions and how is it different from ecosystem services and ecosystem-based adaptation? There are various terminologies that have been used in this arena for some time now. As IUCN is the sort of major global institution working in this arena, would you like to just share with our audience a little bit about how do you explain the terminology, relatively new terminology of nature-based solutions? What is it?
Yeah, thank you, Salim Bhai. As Hasib has mentioned, as nature-based solution, we use this as an umbrella term. And as you say, there are different terminology was available for us to use, like ecosystem-based adaptation, disaster risk reduction, ecosystem-based mitigation. So it's the notion of nature-based solution, as Hasib has already explained, brings nature as a center and use it for the societal well-being is not new. IUCN probably started using the word nature-based solution as back as 2002, but well before that, say for example in CBD COP in I think remember 2000, there was a decision adopted of ecosystem approach. There are 12 principles of ecosystem being adopted. I think, or well beyond that, is a Brundtland Commission where this environmentalism started. This notion of system-based or nature-centric development was in the thinking. But I think since there are so many variations and definitions or I would say theories were there, I think it's a high time to systematize and kind of bring out a standard. This is what IUCN is trying to do and going to publish soon. And collectively, it is put as an umbrella term under nature-based solution. So as I say, there's ecosystem restoration approach. It's nothing new. We have, for example, our coastal zone management or green belt in our coastal area is another example of nature-based solution, probably known as, you can call it a green belt or green infrastructure, or even the directive that the water board's embankments, that certain area of the embankments, mangrove needs to be planted. It's a directive also rests on the principle of nature-based solution. And it's a conceptual framework. I think what is interesting is that previously this was thinking, the general idea is coming from the conservationists, from the environmentalists, so there's a kind of a narrow focus. But now we can see, due to climate change and others, all in academics and the policymakers, so policy practice interface, the NBS has got some traction. So you're using it as an umbrella framework, but underneath that, there are specific approaches we can adopt.
Thank you very much. I think that's correct. And at least my framing and the way I explain nature-based solutions is that it takes us beyond the conservationist thinking that many of us are familiar in, but we are, we are not the people making decisions in terms of, the economy and in infrastructure. But it's important that they understand this and they find it an operationally useful term as well. So that allows me to now bring in our third speaker, Rizai, who, as I said earlier, is a civil engineer. He's working on coastal zone in Bangladesh, looking at the infrastructure of the coastal zone in Bangladesh. And his research interest is in actually doing coastal zone civil engineering management, but with a nature-based solution approach to that. So Rizai, do you want to share with us a little bit about sort of the latest thinking on the concept of a nature-based solution in coastal zone management generally, but also specifically about what are the kinds of things we might think about doing in Bangladesh as well? Rizai?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Raq. I think in general, there are several things I would like to add based on what I have learned is the nature solutions or natural areas, they, in terms of protecting from flooding, sea level rise, or storms, they reduce a lot of economic damage due to properties, road, and others. But there's one thing that needs to be mentioned is they do not provide the all or the full flood protection. From an engineering perspective, I think that is something I would like to add to the table. For example, in several areas in New Jersey or where I had one of the study areas during my PhD, we have found out that the natural areas to provide up to 40% of flood reduction. But there's more than that. The rest, 84%, we need more structures or a combination of both. So that's one thing to add, that they provide a lot of flood protection benefits, but we also need, they could probably work as a first line of defense in that regard. And the other thing in terms of the research and everything is when we look at the natural benefits or even their protection from flooding and everything. Oh, sorry, I think my video was turned off somehow, but now it's on probably. Anyway, so the protections and as well as the services, they largely vary from one place to another, from one storm to another. So it is very much case specific, location specific, and disaster specific. So these are the things I think in terms of research, I think we need to keep in mind that it provides a lot of benefits and it is a solution, but it doesn't solve everything. That's one thing, and it has to be case specific. And in terms of Bangladesh, I think we have wonderful ecosystems in our coastal areas, and a lot of them are under, vulnerable to climate change and development issues. And now we need more research on quantifying the benefits, because once we have the numbers on how much protection they provide, how much economic damage they reduce, and their economic value as well, I think that then we can pitch in these ideas to the policymakers so they can have sort of a trade-off between, different development options that relates natural solutions or incorporates ecosystem services and other, I would say, green ideas. So we need a lot more quantification and understanding of the processes, because we have some idea about what's happening in the coast and changing in the coastal areas, but we don't have, we need more. That's my basic understanding on the scenario in Bangladesh.
Thank you very much, Rizai. So let me come back to Hasib, and I'd like you to pick up on what Rizai said in terms of how is nature-based solutions now unfolding as a form of practice and operationalization, both at the global level, and we'll hear from Natalie Seddon, who runs the global network in a little bit, but also specifically, how do you think it might unfold in Bangladesh? It's just beginning. What kind of direction do you think it can take?
Thank you very much. Let me start with the global arena. The nature-based solution as a term, as a concept, the framing of bringing all the natural or ecosystem-focused solutions together, it has got accelerated over the last few years. And I'm glad that Dr. Natalie Seddon is here. They, with IUCN colleagues, they prepared a document. They tried to analyze the nationally determined contribution that each of the countries who signed the UNFCCC convention, they tried to include, whether they tried to include or not nature-based solution to reduce the carbon emission and keep the global temperature below 20 degrees centigrade by 2030. And it was found that many of the countries from global south, developing country, they are actually doing that. So it shows that although the terminology might be new to us, to many of us, but the practice is not new, what Raqib Bhai just mentioned. But it's still quite low in northern global north. The second example I would like to tell that last COP in Madrid, COP25, there was a special session on nature-based solution. And interestingly, it was led by UNEP, which is currently being led by Inger Andersen, who used to be the Director General of IUCN. And she was joined by another ex-DG, former Director General of IUCN, Akil Steiner, who now leads UNDP. That actually shows how UN bringing together all the countries they operate in and focusing on nature-based solutions. And keeping that momentum going, we strongly believe that it will be one of the major issues being discussed in COP26 in Glasgow early next year. And we have similar focus we have seen in the UN Global Action Summit held in September 2019. That was also quite an important milestone to take nature-based solutions forward. Many of you might know that apart from climate change, this year is supposed to be, actually it is still a super year for nature and biodiversity. Unfortunately, many events are not being held and the days are postponed or canceled because of the pandemic. But we are still expecting that later this year in China, the Convention of Biological Diversity, they will be passing the post-COVID, sorry, I'm just being influenced by COVID. Post-2020 biodiversity, global biodiversity framework, which actually allow us to see not only the next decade, but also up to 2050. So these examples actually show how nature-based solution is being unfolded at a global arena. Coming back to Bangladesh, we have been practicing numerous protected area management interventions, coastal afforestation, ecosystem conservation in different How region, different forests. So if we put not only conservation, but also people in it, human well-being, actually these are nature-based solutions. And we have been practicing coastal afforestation since 1965. We have got 55 years of experience, which is huge. But what about the plans and strategy? Just some quick examples. If you just look into the different planning documents like Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan, Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100, even our national plans like 5-year plans, all includes nature-based solution in one term or other. It shows that nature-based solution, the way as an umbrella concept, it is being appreciated both at national level, like a climate vulnerable country like Bangladesh, as well as at global level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just mention that we are receiving quite a lot of comments and questions from the participants in the chat box. Can the speakers kindly go through them, if you can, in the chat box, and then mark the ones that you feel you would like to respond to? I'll give you the floor again to respond to them a little later. We will be bringing our initial phase to an end. I'll ask the last comment from Raqib to pick up on what Hasib said in the context of Bangladesh, given that IUCN is almost a unique institution that has both non-governmental as well as governmental membership, and the government of Bangladesh is also a member of IUCN. To what extent are you seeing the ability of the government of Bangladesh to absorb these new concepts, and very specifically, is there something that you think we can do with the Planning Commission to incorporate it more operationally in the 8th five-year plan? As you know, we actually had a Learning Hub event with the Planning Commission recently, and they're very interested. The member planning, Mr. Shamsul Alam, wants to know more about this. But his question is always, tell me what I have to do. Don't tell me the theory of it. Tell me what I have to do. So Raqib, would you like to just tell us a little bit about what we can think about doing with them going forward?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as Hasib mentioned, Mbas and the practices is nothing new in Bangladesh. We have been doing it. As you mentioned, as we have been doing it from a narrow lens of conservation. We thinking that Envious is like protecting forest or protecting wildlife. Going beyond that nature is actually needed for the business. Nature is needed for minimizing the cost. For water infrastructure, if it is a business as usual scenario versus you have those water infrastructure, plus you have your nature as well. Has published a paper which shows that $27 trillion per annum is a contribution. Going back to, I'll go back to this Prime Minister's directive of river encroachment, which is all positive thing. So government is doing this matter of, trying to tell them that we need more investment in the nature so that the cost of inaction is less in the long run. How you want to do it? As the other speaker was saying, that we need to quantify it. We need to bring down those uncertainties. Problem with the nature-based, one of the problem is nature-based solution is it is not necessarily to quantify and reduce the uncertainties, and also it's a complex. I mean, when you say nature solution, that means you understand the problem, but the things we are saying, ecosystem management, is very complex, and it needs a lot of players to agree on certain norms compared to engineering solution, which is quite direct. So this understanding this complexity, I think this is where the challenge is, and this is where we need people like you to decipher it and put it in a more palatable, easy to understand languages. I think the policy communication advocacy, the language is a big issue here. Rather than using jargons, we need to use the language that policymakers understand. I would like to hear from Bharat later on. He's on this. Over to you.
Good. Thank you very much, Raqib. Very good. In fact, the whole purpose of this webinar and our network is to, for us, and I put the onus on us as the environmentalists, to be better at convincing everybody else that this is an important thing. I think, some of the failure is our failure. We can't point at other people all the time. So thank you very much. I think we've laid a good groundwork for a further discussion, and I'm very pleased that we have 3 additional speakers that have agreed to join us. I'm going to call on each of them one by one and ask them a specific question. The first is going to be Mr. Sabir Hussain Chaudhary, who's a member of parliament, a very, very distinguished member of parliament, used to be the president of the Interparliamentary Union at the global level, has attended a number of conferences of parties. We've been to many of these together. It's been a pleasure working with him. He now chairs the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Environment and Climate Change. And over the course of the last few months or the last year, he has championed and successfully got the Bangladesh Parliament to actually adopt a resolution. I believe it was unanimously adopted to declare not just a climate emergency, which many other parliaments have done, but a planetary emergency, which has two prongs. It has both the climate change as well as the biodiversity emergency. So a very forward-thinking person, I'd like to invite him to say a few words, and in particular ask him what's happening next. We have a resolution. Is that resolution going to do anything?
Thank you, and very good afternoon and good morning to everyone. I've just put on, I'm sharing my screen, I hope this works, because that is the resolution that we actually tabled and got adopted in the Parliament. So I'm not going to read through that, that is just for your reference. But I think just following on the discussion that we have had so far, one of the major challenges that we have is how do we answer the question, how? You know, we all know what needs to be done, and we can all list 10, 15, 20 different areas of action. But I think the trick is how. And if we can address that, then the communication also becomes a lot simpler. So even with the parliamentary resolution on declaration of a planetary emergency, the challenge has always been how do we implement that resolution? And I think, you know, that implementation basically works at two levels. One is at the national level, what we can do within Bangladesh, and the other is what we would like other countries also to do. Because the moment we talk about the whole issue in a global context, you are of course looking at global action. It is not just Bangladesh, it is also going to be the other countries in the world. Now, when we brought up the resolution, you know, and we used the term emergency, I thought things were pretty bad as they were, which is why we called it an emergency. But now I think after we have had COVID, if there can be something after emergency, there can be a word which entails the urgency of the situation even more. I think then this is the moment. We talked about, you know, the virus jumping from the animal kingdom onto our domain. We currently have a discourse which talks about the healthcare challenge. We talk about the economic challenge, but we are not really talking about the planetary challenge. And I think that is really the context, that is the discourse, that is the discussion which has to come into play. Currently it's pitted as an either-or situation. You know, do we save lives or do we promote livelihoods? So it is not really that, I think. I think, you know, the context has to be the planet, and whether it is planetary overshoot, whether it is looking after nature, whether it is healing nature. And we have seen over the past few days, even in Bangladesh, how nature has made a comeback. Whether it is the dolphins, you know, in the Bay of Bengal, or it is the crabs in the beaches of Cox's Bazar and Kuakata, whether it is the level of air quality in Dhaka, just a couple of months has made a huge difference. So I think, you know, that should be an eye-opener. And yes, of course, we can look at nature to provide the solutions. But unless nature is restored, unless nature is healed, unless nature is in a position to provide us those services, then, you know, even this discussion is not going to go very far. So when we had the resolution adopted, you know, that was, of course, with the COP in Madrid in mind. And then, of course, we had the budget, which is now going to come up. So from the committee, we actually had a set of recommendations on the planetary emergency. You know, how do we now implement it? And the budget for us was always going to be a very important tool in that regard. Unfortunately, because of recent events, you know, we have not really been able to follow up on that. So I don't know how we pick it up. Once the budget is there, we will do that. We have also discussed with you many times, can we form groups that is going to look at various aspects of the emergency and see what we can do there? Because I think now we need to take it forward. We have a very good basis. I think we have an excellent resolution, but now is the time to implement it and to answer the question, how do we go about doing it?
Thank you very much, Sabah bhai. That really is, I think, the crux of the matter. And again, as I said, the onus is on us to be more effective collectively. Instead of doing our own thing in our own place, we have to join forces and be more effective at changing both the national direction of travel, but also the global direction of travel. And you're quite right. If anything, we have not just an emergency, but a super emergency now. So I would now like to invite the next external speaker, who is Professor Natalie Seddon. She was a professor of zoology at Oxford University and also a senior fellow at the Institute for Environment and Development in London, where I also used to be. She has visited Bangladesh and participated in our events here on nature-based solutions, and she was going to organize a major conference on nature-based solutions in Oxford in July, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen with people actually going to Oxford. But nevertheless, I think they do have plans to do other things as well. So I'll invite Natalie to tell us a little bit about what's happening at the global level through the global network. Natalie?
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. It's a great pleasure to be taking part in what is really a very timely webinar. So thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for looping me in. So yes, the Nature-Based Solutions Initiative, we founded that 3 years ago. This is an interdisciplinary global network that brings together the evidence from science, from practice and policy, and provides policy advice and education about nature-based solutions. The initiative is based out of Oxford University, but we're working in close partnership with practitioners across the globe. And the idea is to really bring together the natural, the physical, and the social scientists with the economists and the governance experts and the finance experts to really enhance, but also to communicate clear understanding about the potential, about the value, but also the limits of nature-based solutions to address global challenges. What we realize is that knowledge about how best to work with nature in a warming world comes from practice and from local and indigenous communities. So we're really pleased to be working with ICCCAD and others in Bangladesh as part of the Nature-Based Solutions Bangladesh program to bring together all that rich in-country knowledge of ways of working with nature and bring that together with the science so that together this sort of body of knowledge can better inform the design and implementation of climate change policy around nature and other development policy, both locally and globally. So in July, we were due to have a big international conference based in Oxford University with many distinguished speakers and researchers from all over the world. We have postponed this event to July 2021 because of the pandemic, but in its place this year, we are hosting what we call the Nature-Based Solutions Digital Dialogues event, to which everyone is welcome to join. And the idea here is to discuss the role of nature-based solutions in the economic recovery all over the world post the pandemic, and to explore more precisely what we mean by sustainable, successful nature-based solutions and how we can scale up investment and overcome the governance challenges around that. And I do hope that you will all be able to join us for what I think will be a really interesting and timely event. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Natalie. Let me just share an experience we had just a couple of weeks ago, where we were going to have our usual major every 2-year adaptation futures conference, which is a big international conference of adaptation researchers and experts in Delhi, and that had to be postponed as well. But what they did was they ran a 3-day sort of 2-3 hour long webinar like this with all the major speakers who were due to have been in Delhi speaking on different themes. It wasn't as big as a 3-day conference, but it was certainly a good effort, and it worked very well. We got quite a lot of people. I hosted one of the sessions, and these are now recorded and online available. So it's not the best solution, but it is one way of keeping momentum going forward. And I'm hoping you might be able to do something similar as well. So now let me turn to our third additional speaker, who is Barry Dalal-Clayton. Barry is a very old friend of mine and colleague. We were in IIED in London for many years together. He's now retired, but he still does consultancy work globally. He's an expert in strategic environmental assessments globally. He's written books on it. And at the moment, he is the team leader of a very interesting big assessment, strategic assessment of the southwestern region of Bangladesh with the Sundarbans included in it. And it's just starting, and it will go on for about a year. And I'd like him to tell us a little bit about it, and also tell us how anybody who might be interested in engaging and being part of it, or giving inputs into it, or learning more about it, could engage. So Barry, would you like to tell us about that? Hello, Barry. Mehdi, can we get Barry on? Or have we lost him?
Yes, sir. We have Barry, but I think maybe some connection problem. Can you ask? No, we are not hearing you. Just rejoin or mute yourself and then unmute again. I think you need to be rejoin. Some microphone problem on this connection.
His mic is on mute.
Can you unmute him? Mehdi, can you unmute him?
Yes, I unmute him, but it's not working. It seems his connection have a problem.
Okay.
Can you rejoin? Can you rejoin, Barry?
Yeah, Barry, can you leave the meeting and then come back again? And then once you're back, I'll give you the floor. Okay, so let us move on, and hopefully Barry will be able to join us in a little bit, and then he can also make his contribution. We've got quite a few questions that have come in so far. I will invite each of our speakers, perhaps starting with Rezai, to pick up on maybe one, maximum two questions and respond to them. And if you know who the question is from, please read the question, and if you know who it's from, say who it's from as well. So Rezai, would you like to kick off, and then I'll go to Hasib, and then I'll go to Raqib to end this round.
Thank you, Dr. Haq. I think there is one question that we had related to Sundarban and sea level rise and how we will adapt. Are we that's sort of very early. I'm just calling up. Yeah. So there's some questions related to coastal areas, like, we are having increased amount of disasters, and these areas provide a lot of contribution to global economy. So how this question was from Minhaj Monwar Oni, and I would like to answer that question. That I think we are learning basically how to adapt to these situations, and it's true that coastal areas in all over the world, including Bangladesh, US, or if you look at other countries, they all provide a lot to global economy. So we are learning different techniques, and I would add or complement with the other speakers that we need to learn indigenous techniques, and we need to sort of value the all other ecosystem services, not only the provisioning ones, our regulatory ones, but also the cultural services. So we have a combined and totally ecosystem service valuation, and that we can move it towards. And the other thing is also to learn from the techniques that the locals or the community or people who live by these natures or in the coastal areas, and what do they do to adapt to these situations which they have been facing for years after years. I think that is something where we can learn and apply for areas with similar problems, or come up with their own great solutions. So this is one I would like to answer. And there's one question I think we had related to artificial intelligence and nature-based solution that I found interesting. Someone, I forgot her name, but it was an initial question she asked about what is can we use artificial intelligence in nature-based solutions? So that is interesting for me, because we deal with a lot of computer models that generates a lot of data. I think if we have a large chunk of database, whether it's natural data or economic data or any other sorts of data, I think we can apply artificial intelligence or big data to sort of come up with some solutions, some quantification on the relationships and which options can be more sort of applicable. So that's these two questions I would like to answer, and I'll leave it to you, Dr. Haq, now for the other
Great.
discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rezai. So let me now move on to Hasib. Have you had a look at the questions, and would you like to pick a couple to answer?
Yeah, I would like to reply to the question posed by Nuzhat Neri. She actually talked about the local community, the people who are dependent upon the natural resources. They also have got different types of indigenous solutions. And her question is, so what's the scope and contribution of these indigenous solutions to transform into nature-based solutions? What's the fine line between indigenous and nature-based solutions? Actually, there's no actual, who is practicing nature-based solution doesn't have anything to do with defining things or solutions as nature-based solutions. As long as we are sustainably using, we are sustainably managing, we are protecting, we are restoring our ecosystems, whether it is forest, whether it is wetland, and we are overcoming our societal challenges. And while doing that, we are gaining human well-being as well as biodiversity conservation. I would say, whether it is indigenous knowledge, local knowledge, it doesn't matter. All are nature-based solutions. So I wouldn't say there is fine line between indigenous solution and nature-based solution. Just to end it with an example, you all might be aware of nowadays that floating garden, floating agriculture, that was an indigenous practice which is being practiced for 100 years or so in a specific area of Bangladesh, south central part of Bangladesh, Gopalganj, Madaripur, Firozpur and Borisal region. But now we have redefined it. We are calling it a nature-based solution because it is basically ecosystem-based adaptation, which is a subset of nature-based solution. And we are promoting through government funding, through different donor funding in different parts of Bangladesh. But we have to be very careful when we try to implement, we try to popularize, promote certain technologies, certain solutions, but we have to remember whether we are promoting maladaptation or not, because climate is changing. We have to adapt our nature-based solution along the way we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hasib. Well done. So let me now move to Raqib. Have you had a look at the questions, and would you like to pick a couple to answer?
Yeah, I take two. One questions are directed to me about nature-based solution and gender from Shaila Shahid, and another from Mark from Vietnam. He's talking about Delta cooperation and transboundary cooperation, basically in the coastal zone. The first question on gender is posted by Shaila Shahid. I know she's a renowned gender specialist, so I dare not answer that question, but let me try. Definitely, gender is a big aspect of nature-based solution. My take would be from the two sides. One is the interventions we do, it has to be gender sensitive. The same interventions may not have the same. So in terms of equal access, that is one aspect that we need to understand, the gender sensitivity of the interventions. Other aspect is that we have empirical evidence from our project that whenever there is a nature degradation, it also imposes inflict gender-based violences. So from both angles, I think the nature-based solution has a strong or rather, gender has a strong element of a nature-based solution. And on the transboundary coastal zone issues, question from Mark, let me find that question again, but if I remember, it's yes, definitely. And when there is a difference between the political boundary and the natural boundary or ecosystem boundary. The Sundarban doesn't stop at Bangladesh, it moves towards the India. So when we were talking about management of Sundarban or management of tiger, there has to be a two-country approach. Similarly, in the coastal zone, where there's a continuum of coastal areas and sea, marine protected area, if we talk about, Bangladesh has few marine protected area, but to have the right kind of advantage or benefit from conserving that nature, we need to go beyond our boundaries. I'll give you an example. There was a coral bleach happening last decade, and Thailand coral was completely vanished. Fortunately, scientists saw the coral are coming back, and when actually they found the corals are coming from the Myanmar coral areas. So this kind of continuum is in nature is there. So we need to respect that. And for that, there is, of course, then the mechanism of two countries. There are international mechanisms that has a multi-country mechanism like BIMSTEC, or if you take the international cooperation and other mechanisms, that is there. But it also needs champions within those each country. I guess one of the champions is our Suburb, who actually can change these processes, how we can access or reach policymakers more easily. Not to comment came in the chat box, but I would also like to say that we haven't talked about private sector engagement. It's a big issue. And there are examples how private sector can be. They need to be seen as an ally, not just a destructor of nature. They need to be, I think one of the nature-based solutions principle is to be inclusive, and how we can bring them into the dialogue and showcase. I'll just give you an example from Quito, FONAC. It's a water and electric supply company and the city corporation. They have a fund of 7 million. And with that fund, they conserve 3 protected areas in the swamplands and also forest. And that provides the water to the city corporation of Quito. We have kept the same model for the Halda and the Chittagong water supply. So that's how I see private sector engage. Yeah.
Very good. Very important point to bring in the private sector. I think that we, again, have not done enough in that arena, and something that is worth exploring further. Okay, so thank you very much to everybody for the comments, people, the audience for your questions, and the main speakers as well. Before we wrap up, I'll give each of our main 3 speakers a minute to maybe think forward. A few sentences about what do you think we can think about doing collectively going forward, both at the national or the global, whichever you think is important. And let me start with Raqib this time.
I think this initiative you just mentioned, that collecting the portal, Envious portal, and Hasib has mentioned, there are good examples, but how many of us know about these good examples? So collecting, documenting, analyzing, and presenting, that would be very important. And nature-based solution is not just only for the conservationist agenda, it should be a national agenda, because everybody is related to nature.
Excellent. Thank you. Hasib?
I personally believe that nature-based solution, one of the major challenges is, especially when we are talking about countries like Bangladesh from Global South, often people say that, what is the evidence? Where is the evidence? And then not necessarily we will find evidence in peer-reviewed journal papers. So my take-home message, one of the final comments would be, we have to focus on not only collecting evidence through research. There are so many good practices available on the ground, practiced by indigenous community, local people, by NGOs, which are not available in mainstream evidence or like journal, peer-reviewed journal paper. We need to have a mechanism to bring those things or make them surface, so that policymakers can pick it up and consider them as evidence as well. That will be a very good way to harness the experience that we have gathered over the decades in terms of nature-based solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hasib. Rezai?
Yes, thank you. I just look forward to working with all of the people from different disciplines and different worlds, and know and learn, and basically see all together we can do something better for the betterment of the world and the communities around the coastal areas and everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let me thank all our speakers and all the audience for participating and joining us today. Before I conclude, I'll just share a few thoughts, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Tasfia, who will give you some information on the launch of the Bangladesh Nature-Based Solution Network. In my view, we need to be taking this issue much more seriously and much more effectively. Many of us have taken it seriously, but we have not done so effectively. And so how do we improve our effectiveness? And we have identified a few areas here. Hasib has just mentioned getting good information, bringing that good information into the public domain in a manner that can be used, communicating with other stakeholders, particularly government policymakers, private sector, very importantly, as Raqib has said. So we need to be targeting different audiences with specific information that will appeal to them. We cannot just tell them, you must protect nature. That's not going to work. We have to tell them, it's in your interest to do this. And this is how you can do it, as Sabah has quite rightly said. The how is more important than the what. And so We are now going to be launching this nature-based solution network. We want to bring everybody together to share knowledge and information. The second thing that I think, have an opportunity to do is to take this from the national to the global level, as Sabah has quite rightly said. And the opportunity that I see before us is the fact that Bangladesh is about to take over as the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. This is a forum of climate vulnerable countries created over 10 years ago by then President Nasheed of the Maldives. And it has continued. It is a very high-level forum of the leadership of the country, the prime ministers and presidents of the country. It has moved from country to country over the years. It was last with President Hilda Hein of the Marshall Islands. She had it for 2 years. And then she has now handed it over to Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina of Bangladesh, who will have it for 2 years. So the next 2 years, Bangladesh is going to be the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. It gives us a big platform to not just think about Bangladesh, but to do South-South cooperation across the countries in the forum. There are about 50 countries at the moment. And now, one of the things that the forum has done over the years, and this happened during the presidency or chairmanship of President Aquino of the Philippines, the finance minister of the Philippines at that time, he decided to reach out to the finance ministers of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. And he has actually formed, under his leadership, they formed a group of finance ministers. They don't call themselves CVF. They chose to call themselves V20. They're not 20, by the way. They're 48 like the CVF. They're all the CVF countries. And the finance ministers meet during the annual IMF World Bank meeting in Washington. And they have a side meeting of the CVF V20 finance ministers. And they have actually done quite a lot of things themselves. So finance ministers are not involved in negotiation. They have nothing to do with UNFCCC. They control budgets. They can actually do things in practice. And they have already initiated some. And so Bangladesh's finance minister will be the leader of that V20 group going forward as well. And one of the things I've already mentioned to Sabah is why not a parliamentarians group of the CVF under his leadership. He knows many of the parliamentarians in the vulnerable countries personally, as he was the president of the Interparliamentary Union for many years. One parliamentarian I know who is very, very a big champion is Senator Legarda of the Philippines. She's a very leading activist parliamentarian in the Philippines, and Philippines was the previous chair of the CVF group. So a number of CVF country parliamentarians can perhaps take this planetary emergency idea that Bangladesh Parliament has done and take that forward across the different countries of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. So just a few ideas for us to think about going forward. Let me conclude by mentioning that this is the first of our monthly webinar series. The next one we're hoping to do in June. We will announce the date and let people know. The focus will be on COP26, the Conference of Parties of the UN Framework Convention, which was supposed to have been in Glasgow in November this year. It has been postponed to next year, but the exact date is still not known. We have invited a representative, a high-level representative from the COP26 presidency in the UK to join us, and he has agreed. So we hope to hold that. We will announce that soon. Before we end, I'm going to invite my colleague Tasfia, who has organized, along with her team members, this webinar. Very well organized, Tasfia. Thank you very much. And I'm going to hand over to you and thank everybody for being with us. I hope it's been a useful 1 hour that you have spent with us. Tasfia?
Thank you, sir. Actually, Professor Barry is on with us. So before I speak, I would like to invite Barry to say something.
Okay. Good to have Barry. Barry, go ahead.
Still, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Barry. I'm sorry. I tell you what, Barry, why don't you send us the materials that you were going to tell us about, and we will certainly send them around to the audience. We've got everybody's emails. We'll be sending out a notice of the recording when the recording is ready, and additional materials that we have collected to everybody that participated in the meeting. In fact, we'll send it to everybody who was not able to participate as well, because we have we had more than we could handle number of applications to participate in this. So I think we have almost 200 people who applied, and the platform only allows our 100, so we had to select. So Barry, I'm very sorry we couldn't hear from you, but do send us the materials and we will distribute them, and we'll stay in touch. Tasfia, do you want to conclude? Tasfia?
Yes, sir. I hope everyone can see my screen.
Yes, go ahead.
So yeah, basically, as Nathalie already mentioned that ICCCAD with support from Nature-Based Solutions Initiative and University of Oxford, we are doing a portal, like we are working on a portal, and we are calling it Nature-Based Solutions, and we are presenting showcasing all the, we are trying to showcase all the Bangladesh case studies here. So this portal is by and for the community of researcher, practitioners, and policymakers working in the field of climate change, sustainable development, and nature conservation. And our mission is to enhance the understanding of the importance of nature-based solutions and scale up their implementation. And here, actually, basically, we are working with both NBSI and our partners who are working in Bangladesh. We have already done, as Dr. Haq already mentioned in the first of our presentation, we have done one workshop and we have done one LHE. So we have quite a good base of network. So we will be working with them. We have already started working like few, and we are collating the evidence from practice and all the science evidence on the effectiveness of existing work that Bangladesh are currently doing. And here we would try to find ways how we can implement Envious in future that could benefit us like in from various societal aspects. So our current focus is building an evidence base for the role of nature-based solutions for the economic development. And we will make our portal available through a web platform, and we are assuming to have like sharing and promoting our Envious Bangladesh portal in the 22nd May, which is the World Biodiversity Day, and we will do one soft launch of the Envious Bangladesh portal on World Environment Day, which is 5th June. So basically, there we would be, when we will share this, we would like to have, we would like to invite everyone for their feedback and collaboration as we build on knowledge and awareness of the importance of Envious in Bangladesh. So if you're interested to join the Bangladesh Nature-Based Solutions community, please contact me or drop an email to Dr. Haq or Nathalie, and we will follow up with you accordingly after the Ramadan or after the Eid. So basically, that's all from now. I would like to sincerely apologize that we could not give floor to Jerry. And also, I'd like to thank all the participants and the speakers who could like make their time to join us here and make this event a successful one. I would also like to thank all of my colleagues who have worked from ICCCAD and IUCN. To name a few, Ruksar, Mehdi Bhai, Sarah, Farah, Mim, Khalid Bhai, Mamoon, Jennifer. I'm sorry if I've missed any name, but yes, big thanks to everyone. You have done all the background work, so a big thank you. And over to you, Dr. Haq, if you would like to say one few.
Thank you very much. I'm going to now conclude and thank everybody, including Tasfia and her team, for an excellent job, despite a little bit of glitch for Barry's microphone. But thank you all very much, and we will be sending out information on the event as soon as the recording is ready. Thank you and goodbye.